And I think bringing in a new guy would just be good because it's time for a change and it gives you some young blood or new blood and some new energy in the building. And I can't tell you enough how stupid he looks out there rolling out there in this big baller suit. And I respect the man who wears a nice suit. But then he's getting out coached by a guy who looks like my 4th grade art teacher. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a great Saturday, and I also hope you're looking forward to watching some March Madness games later today. And I just realized to say good morning, but you're going to see this video later in the afternoon. I'm recording this video in the morning, and I'm going to try to get it uploaded as early as possible because we got a good slate of games on our hands today. And also, too, this is your daily reminder that Tobey Maguire, and I know this is completely off topic, but he is the best Spider-Man of all time. Now, getting that out the way, we got to talk about the sleazy car salesman himself, aka, you know him as, John Calipari. If you haven't been living under a rock, you saw or at least heard the news that Kentucky, and more importantly, John Calipari, suffered another embarrassing loss in March Madness. And the reason I use the word embarrassing is because when you're a high seed, when you're a 2, 3, or 4 seed, those first round games, they're cupcakes. Especially when you got the talent that Kentucky has, there's no excuse for losing those. And maybe if you lose one in 5 or 6 years, yeah, you can chalk it up to a fluke and hey, that's March Madness, it is what it is. But when you lose to St. Peter's and Oakland, there's no excuse for it. Where I'm going with this, when you have a team like Kentucky, those should be guaranteed wins. You shouldn't even be sweating those games too much. For example, I'll use my team, Alabama. We're not some basketball powerhouse, but as a 4 seed playing Charleston, in which we did yesterday, yeah, I expected to win that game easily, and we did. Does Alabama have even close to the talent that Kentucky has? Absolutely not, at least in my humble opinion, but Alabama goes out there and beats Charleston by 30 points. The final score is deceiving. I believe it was something like 109-96, but Alabama was up by 35 with 10 minutes to go and put in the bench warmers. My point isn't bringing that up, though. That's how Kentucky should have looked against St. Peter's in Oakland, but they didn't. And why has Kentucky suffered brutal losses in March Madness in the past 2 out of 3 years? Because John Calipari, which he's the main topic and main focal point of this video, is a dinosaur. Calipari has simply failed to adapt, and I'll talk more about that later in this video, so stay tuned for that. However, with that being said, yesterday, late last night, and early this morning, I was talking to, I wouldn't label them as my close sources for Kentucky basketball because I really don't have any sources for college basketball in general, but we'll just call them associates around that Kentucky basketball program. And the notion around that Kentucky basketball program is that this decision is going to come down to ultimately how Mitch Barnhart feels about all this, which is, for those of you who don't know, the athletic director for Kentucky. I got to present you with this information, though, before we go any farther. If Kentucky does want to fire Mr. John Calipari here, they're going to have to write a pretty big check, a $33 million check at that. And even looking at it right here, it's just odd because when we hear the term buyout, more times than not, or not more times than not, every single time we talk about it, it's with college football head coaches, not basketball coaches. Number one, his buyout is utterly ridiculous. And then number two, on top of buying him out, you then got to pay another head coach roughly what? $7-8 million a year? And that's the part of it I think a lot of people don't account for. You're not just buying out the current head coach, you're writing a check to him to leave. You got to pay a new one as well. It's a lose-lose situation. You're not going to come out on top. But like I've said before with firing Calipari, sometimes in this life you got to take 2 steps backwards to go 3 steps forward. And here's something too I want to address. A lot of people out here, they think this decision's solely going to come down to money, but I'm here to tell you that doesn't really matter too much to Kentucky. I'm not going to sit up here and say that $33 million for Kentucky is chump change, but they got the funds to do it. Trust me. From everybody I talked to, firing Calipari is going to come down to one thing and one thing only. Do you want to give him one more year, or is it time to move on now? That's it. That's the thought process behind all of this. So let's get that clear, because there's a lot of people out here that think Kentucky's going, well, we can't fire him because we can't afford to fire him, but they can. Let's talk about this, though. The problem with Calipari is he's arrogant, and he's, by default, the leader of the Kentucky basketball team. That then means his minions, in this analogy here, his players, they become arrogant. And when I say arrogant, I don't necessarily mean they're braggadocious, but I mean the way they view themselves and the way they carry themselves. Nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, walking on this planet Earth loves John Calipari more than John Calipari. He can't do no wrong in his eyes, and for some odd reason, he has this huge ego, which doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever because he hasn't even earned the right to have an ego. Unless I'm missing something here, I believe the man only has 1 national championship. And the way he carries himself, y'all see during the games, you would think he's got 8 rings. And he's been hit with a hard dose of reality these past couple of years because all he thinks he's got to do is go out there, sweet talk all these 5-star recruits, and then roll a basketball out on the court, and the rest is going to be taken care of. But as we've seen, that's not going to work. John Calipari has found out the hard way that he's actually going to have to coach some basketball. And to tell you the truth, I don't know if he can do it anymore. There was a point in time early on at Kentucky, and when I was growing up as a kid, I hated seeing Kentucky on Alabama's schedule because every time I looked at it before the season, I saw Kentucky, I was like, oh, man. I was dreading it. I was like, yeah, that's a guaranteed butt whooping. That's a hard-nosed, physical team, extremely talented team that we do not want to play. But now, fast forward time into 2020, 2021, 2022, etc., our current day and time, 2024, when I see Kentucky on the schedule, I'm not even nervous to the slightest of bits. Kentucky's still a great and fantastic team, don't get me wrong, but I'm not scared of them like I once was, and I share that with you so Kentucky fans that are watching this video, you get an outsider's perspective. If I, as an Alabama basketball fan, am not scared of Kentucky basketball, how do you think all these other non-Kentucky fans feel? I can assure you they feel the same way. And the reason there's nothing to be scared of is because it goes back to what I just stated. Calipari's arrogant, and that arrogance, it falls down on the team because he's the leader and you follow the leader. Let me go into more detail here, though. Here's what I'm talking about. Have you noticed the past 3 to 4 years, Kentucky always either plays up to their competition or they play down to their competition? And the players would never admit it, but 2 years ago against St. Peter's and a couple days ago against Oakland, these Kentucky players didn't think anything about St. Peter's and Oakland. They walked into the game thinking that Oakland was going to bow down to them because they're 4- and 5-star recruits and Kentucky's just simply better. Because John Calipari tells these kids, hey, we're the best. We're the best all year long, even when they're losing. Yeah, we're losing, but we're freshmen. We're going to put it together because we're the best. And I don't have a problem if you tell yourself you're the best, but you got to go out there and back it up. You got to put in the work. The problem is Calipari doesn't put in the work. And it's really sad, man. It really is, because Calipari, the old school Calipari, he used to be this hard-nosed guy who was going to go into games and tell his team, you know what? We're going to be bigger, faster, stronger. And on top of that, we're going to out-physical the other teams. We're going to beat them and wear them down. But now, he don't want to do that. It's all flashy. And I can't tell you enough how stupid he looks out there, rolling out there in this big baller suit. And I respect a man who wears a nice suit. But then, he's getting out-coached by a guy who looks like my 4th grade art teacher. Another thing I want to touch on is this right here. Let's say, theoretically speaking, for the sake of this video, Kentucky, they don't buy them out and they bring them back. Well, I don't know if some of you have been on social media or not the past couple of days, but Kentucky fans, they're out. Most of them jumped off the Calipari hype train after the St. Peter's loss. Now, they're just completely gone. There might be 2% out of 100 that are actually backing up Coach Calipari. So now if you bring them back, you now have this hard friction with the fan base and the head coach, and that's a recipe for disaster. Even this year, I think it was when Florida went into Rupp Arena and just completely shredded them and hit that three-pointer sent into overtime. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Kentucky fans were booing Kentucky during that game. And I don't think it has anything to do with the players themselves. It has more so to do with Coach Cal. They're tired of him. And like I said, let's say you bring him back for next year. Well, can you imagine if Kentucky has a couple bad home losses? They're going to be booing them every game. And I'm also struggling trying to find the bright side and bringing them back. What's the point of it? We know how this is going to go. Kentucky next year, they'll probably go something like 22-9, 21-10, something along those lines, and another NCAA tournament letdown. And you also got to understand, guys, the standard for Kentucky basketball, unless I'm highly misinformed, isn't just to make it to the Sweet 16 or even the Elite 8. Or actually, I'd say the bare minimum is the Elite 8. But they want to make it to the Final Four. And honestly, just due to how poor the past 4 to 5 seasons have been, I think the standard should be moved back to just making the Sweet 16. If I had to give you my best educated guess on what I think is going to happen, I'm leaning towards more of they're going to bring Coach Cal back. Me personally, if you've been watching the channel for a while now, you know how I feel about him. I'd have fired him in 2020. But however, I am not the athletic director of Kentucky, and I'm just trying to give you my best judgment call on what I think he's going to do, and I think he'll bring him back. And if you're wondering why I think that, it's because I think Mitch Barnhart is having a hard time trying to rationalize, number one, firing Coach Cal, and number two, here's the tricky part, who do you bring in to replace him? And I'm not going to lie, that's a pretty tough position to be in, but like I said, what was it, last night or the night before, I don't think it can get much worse than losing to St. Peter's in Oakland, okay? It can't. And I think bringing in a new guy would just be good because it's time for a change and it gives you some young blood or new blood and some new energy in the building. Because when you get a new head coach, even if you go, we'll say 18-11, 18-9, 18-10, whatever the record may be next year, the fan base is going to go, hey, well, it's his first year. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. We're working. We're improving. But with Coach Cal, it's going to go something like this. Here we go again. Another 21-10 season. And you got all the ups and then you got all the downs. And you know how it goes. It's just negative energy. And you don't want that around the program. We'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts down below. But Roman.